is the nicest thing a stranger has done for you? Story 1. After long delays, my flight was canceled while I was standing in line at the gate to board it. Next day was my son's first birthday. I needed to be home, went to the United desk, and they refused to help me in any way. Not only could I not get another flight that day, but nothing the next day either. Despite the fact I was interneting the out of my phone and showing them all sorts of flights, direct, and connecting that would get me there, they were refusing, and I just didn't have money to go buy something else. I was starting to lose my cool. A guy in line stepped out after hearing me. Told him he was some crazy status, and asked to speak directly to the manager. Next thing I knew, he was transferring his own ticket on a direct flight to me, so I could get home to see my boy. I don't even know what happened. I tried to thank him in every way I knew how, and he refused to take anything from me. Just told me he knew how it was when he was younger, and would have wanted someone to do the same for him. I hugged the guy probably against his will and ran and made my plane and was in a first-class seat home. Seriously, dude was an angel I'll never forget. Story 2. My birthday one year was really sucking. I decided to go buy myself a cake at the grocery store and get it decorated because it was my birthday and I wanted something nice. When the guy at the counter asked who it was for in retrospect, he meant what name to put on it. And I said it was for me. He was incredulous that I had to buy my own birthday cake. I just kind of shrugged and went out to finish shopping for groceries. He said my cake would need to be paid for at pickup. When I came back to pay for and pick up my cake, a different person was at the register, and she said my cake had been paid for. It was also decorated a bit more than I thought it should have been. I have not seen that guy working there since, and in my head I've called him the cake fairy. It was a good cake. I still cried eating it because the entire day sucked, but it was a good cake. Story 3. Thanksgiving Day, 2003. I was driving down to my parents on Long Island for Buffalo, a 7 to 8 hour drive. As I'm about halfway, I get a blowout. The tire is just shredded. I managed to get the donut on and slowly got into the next town. Most of New York State is just farms and nothing. I stopped at every store that would conceivably have a tire, but nothing was open. I stopped at a police station. They told me to get a hotel until tomorrow. So I hop back into my car and try to make it to the next town. Try there. That's when my donut went flat, so I get out and start walking. It is 2003. I don't have a cell phone, so I knock on the first house I can find, hoping they let me use their phone so I can call my parents. The lady who answered the door invited me in, let me use her phone, offer me food, and then, to my complete shock, called her friend who owned a used car dealership, had them tow my car to the dealership and put on a new tire free of charge. I went from completely missing Thanksgiving and having to spend the night in some shitty hotel outside Binghamton to being back on my way within 2 hours. I'll never forget that lady. Edited a word. Story 4. I've posted this before, but it's seriously one of the most wholesome moments of my life. In 1990, I was 19 years old, driving cross-county by myself, and all I have is a 63 and a Texaco card. I'm close to empty one night somewhere in Iowa, and pull up to a Texaco station about 5 minutes after they closed. I was trying to only use my Texaco card and conserve what little cash I had. The person working the station wouldn't open to give me gas, so I decided that I'll just put all my clothes on. It was December and about 11 degrees, and sleep in my car until they opened in the a.m. About 2 a.m., I hear a tap on the window, and I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the car. It was the Sheriff Fuck. I explained what was going on. He ran my ID to make sure I didn't have warrants or anything, and then ominously states, that's not how we do things around here. OMG, I was terrified. How do you do things around here? What's going to happen to me, apparently? He was pissed that the guy at the gas station left me there. So he calls the owner of the gas station, makes him come down in the middle of the night and fill my gas tank for free. Then the sheriff calls his wife, lets her know what's going on, and she tells him to bring me over to their place. Mrs. Sheriff proceeds to feed me. Let me take a shower and sleep there until the next morning. Then she feeds me again, packs me a lunch, gives me 20 in cash, and send me on my way. It was seriously one of the most wholesome things that has ever happened to me. Edited to add. Thanks for the gold. Anonymous Redditor. Edit 2 in platinum. Wow. Story 5. I was in a deep depression some years back, and I just decided to walk in the park. I'd sat down for some minutes, and a kid, who could not have been more than 4 years, came up to me and handed me 3 yellow sunflowers. This random act of kindness is one of the most memorable in my life. Story 6. Here in upstate New York, we just got a foot of snow Saturday. Came out to snowblow my driveway to my driveway, already having been plowed. It's a long driveway. Anyways, whoever did it didn't leave a note or anything. No idea who did it. Thanks, stranger. Story 7. I helped a guy go through TSA at LaGuardia in NYC. Around 2008-ish, had never flown before, had no idea what he could take on the plane, how much, etc. Security told him he couldn't use his plastic bags he has his stuff in. Anyway, what rattled me was the fact that he was shoving pairs of very new Nikes into a trash bin. I couldn't fathom why, so I went to ask. He explained his situation, so I told him that if he held tight, ID, go through security, buy him a carry-on, so he could get his stuff through. He handed me 100, and I gave him my crochet project bag to hold his insurance. Got him a suitcase, went back and gave him it in the change and showed him how to go through, remove your belt and shoes, etc. He thanked me, and we hugged. Going our own ways, my flight was delayed by 3 hours at the last minute, and I was already exhausted. I used my purse as a pillow and covered up with my coat, and fell asleep against the wall. When I woke up, there was a fuzzy travel blanket, convertible neck pillow, a mask, a bag of cookies, and a little plush dog with a note tucked in his collar. He stuck this gift between me and the wall and never woke me up. I ended up traveling for 11 more hours, and that thoughtful little package saved my sanity. Random airport dude. And glad you got to keep your kicks. And I still have the puppy. I named him LG. Edit holy this blew up while I was at work. Thank you for the silvers and gold. The note was just a Nike check mark with a smile face. Be kind, y'all. Just do it. Story 8. I bought my condo at 27 from a guy I've never met. There were a lot of offers way over asking price in a competitive market. But I offered what I could. I had lost out on many places before over months of searching, being outbid by ridiculous cash offers I had no chance of beating. I fell in love with this neighborhood and made 2 other failed offers here earlier. So I wrote him a letter just telling my story, how hard I'd try to save everything I could to buy my first place and make a home and start really establishing myself. He ended up taking my offer over much higher bids because he bought this place decades ago when he was a struggling 27-year-old trying to establish himself. And my letter resonated with him. He probably could have made another $40K, but he wanted to give me the opportunity he had. I'm forever grateful. Story 9. I fell asleep at the wheel and drove my car into a ditch right at the entrance of my street. Must have been 1 a.m. This guy was outside on his porch in a white t-shirt, rain boots, and boxers having a smoke. Yells over to me if I need help. I say I do. He says, give me a sec, brings out his old Toyota 4Runner and hitches my car to it. Pulls my car out in no time. Never seen him again. Story 10. My bathing suit flew off one of those wave machine things on a cruise ship when I was young. Not down a bit, exposing some of my butt off. Whoosh, trying to stand, keep my boyhood covered, and looking for my trunks in a tsunami was tricky. A towel hits me in the face. Thank you, kind stranger. Story 11. In Paris. The metro is not wheelchair friendly. We got stuck once because the accessible station was closed, and we were diverted elsewhere. 2 guys walked up, picked my MIL in her chair, carried her up a flight, through the turnstile, and down a flight to the platform, quick as you please, and they wanted nothing more than thanks. I don't think they even knew each other. Story 12. I was on the bus, freaking out about how I was going to feed my fiancée, and as I was the only person working 100 commission job. A stranger heard me on the phone freaking out on the verge of tears, and politely alerted me I had dropped some money. It was $40, and me and my fiancée used every penny. I never got to thank them, but I quit that job, I think a week or so later, and found something way more stable. Story 13. When I was 9 or 10, I missed the school bus. This big guy picked me up and run towards the bus, screaming to try to make the bus stop. It eventually did, and he put me inside of it, and we then dipped. I couldn't even say thanks, and I was a chubby one, no less at grammar. Story 14. When I was around 8, I was crossing a street without much looking. As soon as I started crossing, a stranger pulled me back by my shirt. Of course, a car flew by the same moment. Thank you, stranger. Story 15. I was at a bar with my then-girlfriend. Seated next to us was an older gentleman who was alone and looking forlorn. After a time, he tapped my girlfriend on the shoulder and said, I like the way you two talk to one another. Hey, Race, what I'm going to do? I spent a fortune on these tickets for my wife. Unfortunately, she can't go anymore, and I just don't feel like going without her. So, I'd like you two to have them. The only catch is that the concert starts in 20 minutes. He didn't elaborate, nor would he accept payment. He asked only that we go, enjoy ourselves, and keep being good to each other. He paid his tab and left. And that's how I got front row seats to Prince. Story 16 was a groomsman in a wedding, and my flight got delayed, like really delayed. So bad that Delta brought out the we are sorry care packages and complimentary pizza. Toward the 7th hour, I started getting pissed that the front desk wasn't giving us answers. Well, when I was going off, some 7-foot-tall, diesel-looking black guy saw me, got in line for the complimentary pizza, and handed me the plate. I ate it and reflected on what I must have been. Later, he found another flight and was kind enough to ask the front desk women to book 2 tickets instead of 1. He gave me the other ticket. Apart from the nod I gave him once we got off the plane, I never saw that dude again or even learned his name. I made it to the wedding just in time. Story 17. When I was 11, I was stupid enough to cross in front of a bus with only a cursory glance backwards, and I missed the minivan that had just started to overtake the bus. I got hit by the left-hand corner and flung across the road, injuring my legs. My knee still hurts, sometimes all this time later, and splitting my lower lip. As I lay there, a lady who I had seen on the bus a few times came over and helped me over to the curb, checked me over, made sure my parents were called, made sure an ambulance was called, and generally looked after a scared, tearful, hurt little boy. She was wonderful, and I still see her around to this day, and she always gives me a big smile when I wave hello. Story 18. I was once feeling really down cause of school, and just life in general. I stopped at a convenience store on the way home to pick up a bit of chocolate to make myself feel better. The guy at the register must have noticed how miserable I was looking, because he let me have the chocolate bar for free. It was a really simple act of kindness, but it almost made me tear up in that convenience store and instantly improved a shitty day. Story 19. I posted this before somewhere else, but it's easily this happened during the dark days of my childhood. In the mid-'80s, I was 10 years old, and I was having serious problems with my family, mostly my father, and was doing absolutely miserably at school. That year, I had the bad luck to have a really bad music teacher. Now, music wasn't a big subject. We had one lesson a week, but that person made a living for me. Looking back now, I think he was just a quirky character, but he had an extremely short fuse and was prone to switching from hearty, belly laughter to shouting and roaring at someone for nothing at all at the drop of a hat. I just never knew where I was with him, and adding that to my problems at home just brought me to the brink. One day in December, my mother had promised she'd come to school on the day we had music lessons, and she'd have a word with him. So I stood in front of the classroom, waiting for her, and she didn't show up. My brain just went into complete panic mode. I could not face that teacher on my own for another lesson. I just couldn't. So I walked away and walked out of the school. I walked through the town. I walked through the outskirts of the town and through the industrial area around that. I walked through the first village, then the second village. It was very cold and there was a lot of snow on the ground, so I wasn't walking fast, but I just kept walking. At some point, a car pulled up next to me and a man, probably in his 30s, winds down the window and asked me if I wanted a lift. I said no, thank you. I had no idea where I was heading myself, after all. And as a young girl, I had been warned about taking lifts from strange men. I just kept walking through the next village, and the next. It was beginning to get dark. I started to cry. I was feeling worn out and tired and so cold. I must have been walking for the better part of 6 hours at that point. Then that same car pulled up next to me again, and the same man asked if I wanted a lift now. I really didn't care about anything anymore, so I got in and was warm in the car. He started chatting to me, easy and friendly, even offered me a cigarette, which I found very odd. Eventually, he got me to open up a bit and tell him why I was walking down country roads in the middle of winter all by myself, how I felt my parents would be better off without me, how I felt they didn't care and hated me. He kept talking to me about my family, who else I have who might care about me. So I tell him about my grandmother. I've always been really close to her. He's asking me if I wouldn't like it if he dropped me off to her house, and then see if maybe I can stay with her instead of my parents. I'm just so exhausted at this point, and I agree. He turns the car around and drives back. And on the way, he tells me that he'd been thinking about me on that road the whole day, since he had first asked me if I needed a lift, that had left work early to drive around, and see if he could find me. To make sure I was okay and safe, he dropped me off outside my grandmother's house and drove off. My grandmother gave me the longest, hardest hug anybody had ever given me, and I stayed with her for the next couple of weeks until things settled a bit. I never told anybody about getting a lift from a total stranger, but I've never forgotten him, and I never will. If I ever find myself in a similar situation, I hope I'll be as sweet and kind as him. Story 20. Dropped my wallet in a mall parking lot. Some lady found it and mailed it back to me with a nice letter. All the money was still in it. I felt like a Dark Souls character who reversed hollowing at a bonfire. Story 21. My keys dropped out of my pocket on a bus stop and realized only 10 to 15 minutes after I boarded the bus, alighted, and took a bus back and found it covertly placed on a ledge right next to where I seated. Story 22. Going through the line at Aldi, and I had a bunch of stuff for Wick: cheese, milk, yogurt, cereal, and juice for my pregnant with twins girlfriend. Find out Aldi doesn't participate in the WIC program, and though I'm broke otherwise, I apologize and ask if they could restock it for me, and out of nowhere this nice lady says she can cover it. I say, wow, thank you, but not needed as I could go to Walmart down the road. She insists, tells me congratulations and best wishes for the babies. She really restored a lot of my faith in humanity that day. Story 23. Once, I was carrying my sobbing infant in the grocery store while waiting in line to check out. I was super overwhelmed. It was my first trip out after my son was born, and a kind older man said, one day, you're going to look back on this with happy memories and even miss these moments. He then insisted that I cut in front of him in line and bought all of my groceries, man. That made a huge impact on me. What a wonderful man. Story 24. I spent some time helping a customer that my coworkers seemed annoyed with, called and be bothered with, because she had so many questions. The lady left, and about 30 minutes later, she flagged me down in the parking lot as I was going out to break. I went in her car, and she thanked me and handed me a bouquet of flowers she had just gone and bought for me. Very sweet and very unexpected. Story 25, I was struggling to carry all my books after I got off the bus, and they didn't fit in my bag since I already had 4 other textbooks in my bag and I couldn't get on my bike, so a lady ran out of her house and gave me a bag, and I almost cried because that was the nicest thing a stranger has done for me. Story 26, I love telling this story as it helped me fall in love with the city ID just moved to. So here I'm a 23-year-old graduate who's just moved to a brand new city for my first real adult job. ID just finished my first week of work, and my colleagues had decided we would go for an after-work drink in the city center as we have half-day Fridays. I, living in the city center, get to the bar first as it was just around the corner from my home. As I'm standing at the bar looking up at the drinks menu, taking in all the options, a chap comes in, stands next to me, and says, "Oh, what a lovely day it is." And I respond politely agreeing, and he carries on making conversation. "So, what brings you to the pub so early?" To which I explain how ID just moved to the city, just finished my first week, and about to have my first beer in the city. "Oh, well then, welcome." Eventually the barman comes up to me and asks what ID like. And as I answer the man ID, just met when, "Oh no, he'll get this chap's drink, it's on me." I then thank him and respond, "It's all right, you don't have to know no. Welcome to the city." ID just hoped that one day, when my son has his first beer after his first week, someone would do the same for him. That small act of kindness from a random stranger welcoming me to a new big scarify city made me know straight away I was going to like it here. And I love it. Story 27, I've told this story before. So here's a copy paste. When I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1. So I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get, and then decided after ID gone through them all. One day an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me, and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away, and I went back to my piles, able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her, but for me, having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise to never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. This was probably about 20 years or so ago, but I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. Story 28, paid for my wife's medicine. When we were waiting in line at the pharmacy, my wife was really badly burned in a cooking accident, and that day the medicine was $75 for some lotions and pills. He paid for all of it. Really took us by surprise. Edit, didn't know this would become my top upvoted comment. A couple people seemed to be confused by how it went down, probably due to my bad writing, and I think this story needs a little more background. In summary, we were waiting in line at the pharmacy, and he approached my wife, and I, because she had a walker, was 21 at the time. He also came up to me first because I was wearing my USMC shirt. At the time, I had been a pulley for 9 months and was back from a workout session with my recruiting office. He asked me when I was leaving for boot camp, and I told him I was leaving in the next 2 months. We ended our conversation because he got called up to the counter and asked us to come with him and bought her meds there. I still do feel kind of guilty as I never was able to go to boot camp and become a Marine. My wife went through emotional and had severe PTSD. I could not bring myself to leave her, so I put an end to my initial contract. If you're out there reading this, sir, I am sorry. Edit, 2 people want to know what happened. It was her birthday. I was at work, and she wanted to make apple fritters. She decided to heat some oil for deep frying. We had a gas stove, and the oil boiled and caught fire. She freaked out and tried to pour it into the sink, but it got spilled all over her legs and stomach. The kitchen was also partially on fire, and she was trapped in the house as I had locked the door on my out. Her hand were covered in oil, and our door was round, and she could not get it opened. She ended up spending 2 weeks in the hospital with 2 major surgeries. She spent 3 months at home, where her mother and I took care of cleaning and changing her bandages every day. I got really good at bandaging on a bright side. I am very thankful to her mom that temporarily quit her job to come help me as I was working 60-hour weeks, plus my mandatory USMC pulley training 2 times a week. Edit 3, thank you all for the kind words, and thank you for the gold. After reading all of these comments, my wife and I are going to take a serious look at the Phoenix program. Again, thank you all. Story 29, my first wife abandoned us when my son was an infant. It was rough, but I survived. One evening I was at dinner with some friends. I had to change the baby. There was no table in the men's room. I asked the lady leaving the ladies' room if it was empty, and she checked for me, gave me the okay. While I was trying to get my diaper bag sorted, she came up and offered to change him. I told her I had it, but she insisted and put her arm around me. Apparently I'd been holding in a breakdown the whole time, and she saw right through it. I cried for a minute while a total stranger changed my infant son. thanked her profusely, and went back to dinner with my friends carrying a little less weight on my shoulders. No clue who she was, but she was an angel to me that night. Story 30. I was dirt poor pregnant. Hubby wanted me to call a locksmith to have a key made for an abandoned car on our property on the off chance that we could get it up and running. The locksmith refused to charge me after making the key. In hindsight, maybe the locksmith didn't want to leave a paper trail after making us a key for something that didn't belong to us, but at the time I accepted it as difficult to swallow charity. Story 31. A really small thing, but I hope I remember it forever. My son was probably 2 or 3, and we went to the mall for some reason. My son liked looking at displays and stuff. Well, there was a model train set in a case that you could put a one in and watch them go around for a while. I was pretty broke if I recall, and never had cash on me regardless. He was content just looking at the display. A group of loud mall teens come through and go past. One of them comes back and puts $1 in the machine and says, "I always like watching trains too," then hurries off back to his friends. My son lit up. I never would have expected that action from a stranger, let alone a teen with his friends in a mall. Story 32. My mother and I were visiting Carlsbad Caverns in M back in 2011 or so, and the tank had emptied just as we got there. We didn't worry as we saw a gas station right before the main entrance. However, we got done in the caverns and came out to find the gas station closed and not even taking credit cards. It's the only one without going back to town, which we couldn't make it to as we're standing there trying to see if we had service and what to do. A young couple comes up and asks what's wrong. We explained the situation, and they suddenly offered to grab us some gas from town and bring it back as they were running back to town for something before continuing back on the same highway. They told us to go grab some food at a nearby cafe, and they'll find my car and leave the gas can for us. We offered them money, but they didn't want any, saying it was just a couple bucks to fill my small can, so we trusted and go grab food. As we're coming out, there's my gas can full sitting next to my car. I'm so thankful for that random, lovely couple. I also now prepare better in regards to my gas tank. Story 33. I'm a guy. One time this girl said she really liked my outfit. It made me feel insanely good. Ever since, I always compliment the women in my life and the occasional stranger on their style. Sometimes simple kindness makes a major impact. Story 34. An old lady put away my shopping cart and asked if I was okay. I'm not yet 40, but at that time my gallbladder was inflamed and I was waiting for surgery. I felt like utter, but needed to buy some food. I must have looked horrible. In fact, even after my surgery, my health got much better, and I'm getting new things wrong with me, and old ladies keep wanting to help me. Young people should be helping old ladies, not old ladies helping young people. Story 35. I'm currently not getting paid during the shutdown. Myself and 2 of my shipmates were at lunch in uniform, and a woman paid for our lunch. Small act, but in times like these, it is beyond appreciated. Story 36. Went up to snowboard in Park City. Totally forgot my snowboarding mitts at home, and was in a board barehanded, because I wasn't about to drop 50 on a pair of gloves. This dad with 3 kids overhear my conversation and offers me to borrow his extra pair of gloves for the day. Mind you, this man has never seen me before. I could have walked away with the gloves and not say a word after the day. He gave me his number, not the other way around, and just text him when he's done so I could drop it off for him. 5 to 6 hours later, I call this man up, and he already left the mountain. I end up hiding the gloves behind a booth and send him a picture of where it's at, because he planned on coming back up the mountain again. Genuinely amazing man. Wish I could have left some cash or something for him, but I didn't have any on me. Story 37. I once got on a train late at night. I was going from start to end of the line to change, which was nearly an hour journey. When I got on the train, there were 2 other people, one young man and a much older, grumpy-looking man. After the second stop, the young man became aggressive toward me for rejecting him and was trying to pull me off the train to do God knows what to me, and the old man helped me get him off the train and away from me. After I thanked him and he calmed me down, I was very upset. He sat down in the row behind me and looked out of the window. When I got off, he did too. He waited on the same platform as me, just further down from me, so I assumed he was waiting for the same connection. He wasn't. Train comes and I get on. I see him stand up, wave, and walk to the stairs to get back to the platforms going the other way. That man had missed his stop, waited on the wrong platform, and then went right on back, all while saying nothing just to make sure I was okay. I think about that man often. I wish I could thank him for that. Story 38. After rehearsal, I was directing for a performance of Handel's Messiah in church just before Christmas one year. A lady approached. She had been sitting in the open downtown city church as a visitor, listening to the orchestra, choir, and soloists. The lady was obviously moved by the music, especially the Hallelujah chorus, which was sung just at the end of the rehearsal. She said that I had a way with the ensemble that encouraged them to perform at their absolute best. I was astonished when she took out her checkbook and wrote a check payable to the church's music department for $17,500. asking that it be an anonymous gift toward funding future concerts open to the public in the downtown area. Story 39 Easter Day, 2013 car was broken down in a small town between Arizona and Utah. Alternator was broken, was 18 at the time with 3 other friends. A man saw us all panicking as we were trying to get back to our college town. He had been a mechanic or something and recognized that we had something wrong with our alternator. He spent 3 hours working on fixing it and only asked us for the money it cost for the new part he needed. Once he finished, we drove 2 miles and broke down again. He had been following us to make sure we were okay for the first few miles, and then got a rope and pulled us back to the shop gas station area he was helping us at. He spent another 2 hours and fixed it perfectly. We drove home and came home perfectly. Throughout all of this, him and his girlfriend were bringing us water and buying us pizza. For absolutely no other reason than being a good person, this man spent his entire Easter Sunday helping a group of poor college kids get their car fixed and back to their college town. Story 40, we got lost on our way to Paris Disneyland when I was a kid. My dad and mom don't speak French. I speak a very little bit of French. What you learn at school, I was maybe 13 at the time. I asked her for directions to Disneyland. She proceeded to drive ahead of us all the way to the intersection where the road signs show the way to Disneyland. Story 41, my flight out of Syracuse was canceled, and when I finally made it to the front desk, they told me it would be 2 days before I could get home. I decided I'd rent a car and drive to NYC to catch a flight out of one of the airports. As I was getting to the counter, a woman, whose flight had also been canceled, announced she was driving to NYC and welcomed anyone to join her. On an impulse, I said yes, and we started the journey to NYC. She turned out to be one of the kindest people I've ever met. While calling AA to figure out my next situation, the customer service person was incredibly rude and refused to do anything, eventually hanging up on me. Seeing I was frustrated and upset, this wonderful woman proceeded to call customer service agents over the next 2 hours. I would explain my situation, and she would pretend to be my mother and ask for a solution. Ended up getting fully refunded and booked on another flight the next morning. I was planning on just sleeping in JFK until my flight, but she offered her couch in her apartment and a hot shower. I refused at first, but the prospect of a hot shower after such a stressful day was too much for me to pass up. On the way to her apartment, she even asked the cab driver to go a little out the way to swing by some famous sites in NYC, because I'd never been. I still think about her often and wonder if she realizes how big of an impact her kindness had on me. Story 42, not quite a stranger, but a person I'd only met once. Let me crash at their place for a few days when I was surprise evicted by a crazy Airbnb host. Story 43, I'm a bit of town mouse, but I spent a summer in the country with relatives as a teenager, very rural, with miles between some houses. I love long walks, and one sunny day, I decided to take a very nice one. There was this big road that led around the area in a circle. Looked like a good couple of hours of strolling. This was before smartphones, so I couldn't gauge the distance perfectly, but I was convinced I could handle it. Grabbed a soda and a freshly charged MP3 player and set out in the afternoon, convinced I would be back by dinner. I had made a bad misjudgment of scale. After several hours of walking, I was nowhere near home. My phone had no signal. City Slicker me hadn't even considered that. There were no streetlights and no cars. It was getting dark and I could barely see the road beneath my feet. Chances of a Leatherface attack had gone up about 1,000. Houses were extremely far apart, too. I passed one and knocked on the door, but no one was home. I seriously debated going to sleep on their porch and hoping someone would eventually turn up. But in the end, I kept walking. Finally, I found a house with a light on. I banged on the door, and a middle-aged woman answered. The first words out of her mouth were to straight up ask if I was there to rob her, refreshingly direct. Really? I assured her I was harmless and explained my situation. Her demeanor flipped 100 from suspicious to charitable. I had just hoped to use her phone, but she insisted on driving me home herself, and also on feeding me. The route she took continued around the loop, and I realized I had barely made it halfway, and B, hers was the last house for a very long while, and things got a lot more woodsy after that. If she hadn't helped me, I would have been walking all night through the woods.